One thing that it's important for us to understand is that today more than ever, we are over-consuming foods, or we are overfed. However, we are undernourished for a lot of people. Most Americans have specific nutrients that we are falling short in consuming throughout our daily diet. And that would be dietary fiber, potassium, calcium, and vitamin D. Pretty important nutrients that we tend to not get enough of. And what are we consuming too much of? Anybody know?
Fats, oils.
Wow, you guys are good. Didn't take long to think about that. That's right. Added fats, added sugars. Okay? Specifically some of those solid fats, those fats that we know are less healthy for us. So as you take this, information out into the community and out into your organizations, keep that in mind. And we're not here to, take someone to that perfect diet at all, but we are here to encourage them to make some small changes and take small steps to help them incorporate, a good variety and a good balance. And the key word that I like to use is nutrient rich. Okay, so we might not be able to always have a large variety of foods available to us, but the ones that we do keep available, we can look to see that they are able to supply us with a combination of different vitamins and minerals. And we'll talk about what some of those are too. So I mentioned before about this plate. How many of you have seen this plate, just by a show of hands? Everybody? Somewhat? Well, about 2 years ago, this replaced, I think it was June of 2010 maybe or so? So a few years ago now. It replaced the pyramid. It's taken several forms over the years. Some of you can think back, 25, 30 years ago, and we just about every 5 years or so, it's, revamped. And this is what we're using right now. This is based on the 2010 Dietary Guidelines for Americans as well. And you hear a lot about this. It's not only in our schools, it's, out in the communities as well, but I feel like it gives a good one-shot glance representation of when we sit down to eat a meal, how we should fill our plates from the foods from the different groups like that. So I am pretty sure that most of you probably have a good understanding of what foods belong to these different groups here, but we're going to take a quick run through here as well. So just call out, tell me foods and what you think of that would belong to the fruit group. Apples, bananas, strawberries, like you're back in grade school. Okay. That's good. Grapes, oranges. So I've heard a lot of whole fruit. What else? Applesauce. Pomegranate. Peaches, pineapple. Great. How about juices? Dried fruit. Those also belong to our fruit group here. Canned fruit juice, as long as it's 100% fruit juice, we can consider that a serving of fruit. Now, I can see what you're thinking here too. Yeah, well, it's certainly, preferred that if someone has the ability to eat a whole apple rather than drink the apple juice, because what happens is one of those nutrients I mentioned that we don't get enough of is dietary fiber, and we don't get fiber from juice. Even if your orange juice has lots of pulp floating around, it's really not going to give you the same benefit as eating the whole orange. And actually, apples, oranges, and bananas are 3 of the listed least, or I should say, the most inexpensive fruits available too. So that's certainly something. They tend to be available all year round. And the price of those, now apples does vary somewhat. They tend to be less expensive in the fall possibly. But, certainly those are 3 that you can look for as well. Or look for locally grown produce too, and then that can certainly, aid to the cost there often. Now, just to talk a little bit about canned fruit. A lot of people that live in poverty used the assistance of food banks or, maybe through churches or other food sources like that. So we end up with a lot of canned goods. What I would encourage you to ask them to look for, if it's available, is to look for canned goods packaged in its own juice or in light syrup. If they say, well gosh, all that they had was, peaches and heavy syrup, can I still eat that? I would rather them eat the peaches and heavy syrup than, end up choosing something even less nutrient rich to complete their meal as well. You can rinse it off. I get asked that often. Can you just rinse it off and that eliminate all the added sugar? It won't eliminate it all, and I can't give you a percentage as to how much it does eliminate, but it will help to reduce that added sugar from the canned fruit itself. So it's your canned fruit, your dried fruit, your whole fruit, and your 100% fruit juice that would account for a serving of fruit in one's diet. Vegetables. Let me hear some.
Broccoli.
Lettuce, collard greens, kale, asparagus,
Lamb's quarter.
squash. Okay, what was that you said?
Lamb's quarter.
I don't even, what is that?
It's a weed in the garden, and oh my goodness, makes the best BLTs.
Oh, I just learned something, very good. That's right, and same thing, along with the fruits and what, would be counted as a fruit serving, your vegetable juice, 100% vegetable juice, as well as your canned vegetables. Frozen vegetables are an excellent alternative, and they, do not have the added salt, unless you get them frozen in a nice butter or cheese sauce, then you're gonna get some added sodium in there. But just plain old frozen vegetables is great. Same idea with the canned vegetables. The best thing you can do when preparing those is drain the liquid off that comes in the can with the vegetable, and then prepare them, cook them in fresh water, whether it's on the stovetop, in the microwave, however you're choosing to prepare the cooked vegetable, we wanna drain off that liquid that it's been sitting in and cook that in fresh water as well. Grains, let's hear some grains.
I would like to ask something.
Sure.
You're recommending the 100% fruit juices and the 100% veggie juices. Aren't they expensive?
They could be, but this also might be something that they're getting from a pantry, coming home. So if we kind of think of that mindset, we can let them know that it still would fulfill
It would be acceptable.
part of theirs. Now, that brings up a good point too, in that I didn't mention with your fruit juices, not only, are they low in fiber, they really don't provide a source of fiber at all. They are a concentrated source of sugar. So all fruit contains naturally occurring sugars. But we can eat an apple about the size of a baseball, or drink just a little 4-ounce glass of juice for the same amount of energy that would be provided, or calories from that. So, it is suggested, and especially when we think about, children and those being at risk of becoming overweight or obese, or for any child, to limit their fruit juice to no more than 8 ounces per day. And that's the American Academy of Pediatrics suggestion for how much fruit juice should be consumed, 100% fruit juice.
Does anybody remember as far back as the juice glass that was about 4 ounces?
Yeah. Actually, would you go in my office? I have on that back shelf, like an example of a juice glass, please.
Now, can you cut it with water as well?
You could dilute
Cut
it.
those ounces, I mean.
Yeah, if you took, say, like 4 ounces of actual 100% juice and added 4 ounces of water, sure, you could do that. But it's not going to, if you're still consuming the 4 ounces of juice,
Right.
you're still getting the same, it's just the volume, is increased. Yeah, here's those little 4-ounce glasses. So that's a serving.
Has anyone seen any recently?
If you go to Goodwill sometimes, or yard sales, flea markets, you can find them, but no, daycares, look in the children's section, maybe in the discount stores, you can find them. And this is 8 ounces, so again, our glasses at home don't normally look like this. So when someone sits down to fill up their glass of juice, they're likely filling up a 24 ounce glass, so they're getting at least twice this amount, of juice in there. So, okay, good points, thank you for that question. So with our grains, breads,
Rice.
pasta, rice. Okay, so with our grains then, encouraging you to suggest whole grains when possible. Most stores anymore carry, even the store brand of a brown rice compared to a white rice. May take some education. Brown rice takes longer to cook, than white rice. It's gonna have a little bit of a different texture. One way to help transition someone into changing to whole grains may be, if they're able to, one day, one time get a bag of brown rice and the next time get a bag of white rice and mix the two together. So they're, getting a little combination of each. Cook them first separately, but then mix them together. Because the brown rice, if you mix the brown and the white in the pot together, it's not gonna be done when you go to eat. Same thing with pasta. I cannot convince my husband to eat all whole grain pasta. So what we do is we mix it into a canister, and then that way I have a box of white and a box of whole wheat. And to me, I still feel like it's a little better for my kids and our family, to at least have a little mixture of both. That's our compromise, we'll say. So,
Basmati rice or jasmine rice, do they have as much fiber and things as brown rice does?
I don't
So I know
believe,
like the Asian food stores have it really cheap.
yeah, I don't believe so, but I can't say.
Brown
quote
basmati
on that.
does, white basmati.
Yeah,
It's all about whole grain.
Right, because what happens is that outer shell, if we look at what is a whole grain, that outer shell is typically removed, and the white flours, right, the more processed it's become. About minute rice. It is more processed. They do make a brown minute rice that nutritionally will be more complete than a white. If that's what you're comparing, if you say, okay, I need to purchase minute rice, which should I get? In that case, I'm still gonna, try to suggest that you focus on the brown rice. But yeah, it is gonna be more processed. It's not as complete or whole.
They have the kind you can, in the bag, in the
Right.
boiler bag.
Oh yeah.
That
Everything's so convenient anymore, isn't it?
It's hard.
We forget that we have to cook sometimes. With your grains,
That's
I'm
adding
sorry.
a lot of expense too, isn't it?
absolutely, the more convenient a food is, you know, if you buy a little baby carrot, you're gonna pay more for it because it's nicely cleaned and peeled for you and ready to eat than if you just go back to buying a 2-pound bag of whole carrots.
You can
Again, it's
have
just that
organic for
time factor.
$1.79 for 2 pounds.
You're exactly right, yeah. With your grains, something else to consider too is the labeling, because a loaf of bread says wheat bread does not mean it's a whole wheat bread. You want it to say a whole grain if you're truly looking for that to be a source of your whole grains. First ingredient typically on just wheat bread that's labeled is enriched white flour. So it has some nutritional benefit that's been added to it, but you're again not getting as much of the dietary fiber as you would from a whole grain. Moving on to proteins here. Any thoughts on what foods would belong to the protein group?
Beans.
Beans, boy, that's the one thing you take away. You'll know beans belong to the protein group today.
Beans,
How about-
lentils, peas,
Uh-huh.
any of the seeds,
Well,
amaranth.
And beans are
quinoa,
unique in that we
nuts.
can also consider them a vegetable serving depending on how they are being applied to our meal. So they actually are like the only food that can fall into 2 different food groups here too. Eggs are a very good source of protein and fairly inexpensive for, you know, the whole source of nutrition that we get from our eggs. We mentioned, of course, the lean meats, the poultry, the fish are also going to be found. What about some plant-based alternatives? Tofu. Nuts, soy, that's right, nut butters are also going to be a source of protein. Last but not least, we have our dairies food group. What foods would belong to the dairy group?
Cheese.
Cheese, yogurt, so of course our milk kind of seems the most obvious, and then those products made from milk too.
Ice cream.
Ice cream, actually ice cream does belong to the food group of dairy here.
No, it's over there at dessert.
Yeah, is that extras? The one thing I will encourage you to, you know, pass along to your groups that you're going to be speaking to is to try to choose your lower fat dairy products when it comes to your milk. I think there's the misconception that whole milk, that good old vitamin D milk, has more calcium, has more vitamin D, and it doesn't. It contains a comparable amount to your fat-free and skim milk as well. The richness that is found in the taste of the whole milk or the higher fat milks comes from the fat content simply. So anyone over the age of 2 is perfectly suitable to be consuming your lower fat dairy products, unless there's a special reason why, you know, they're under the guidance that they need a higher fat milk, of course. But for our general population, you know, encouraging low fat milk or skim milk after the age of 2 is what we would suggest for them to use. Okay, so we've covered essentially the basic 5 food groups here. Now, how many of you can, you know, say with assurance that you're able to eat all 5 food groups at every meal you sit down to? Oh, very good. I have to say that's awesome, but you are certainly in the minority of being able to do that. Yeah, so but my rule of thumb is if you can aim to include at least 3 of the 5 food groups at a meal, that certainly is going to help you be able to consume a variety of foods over the course of the day, okay? So if you think about your meal today, you know, that was one way we were able to do that. So keep that in mind as you know, go out to your groups. This can be overwhelming. If I come to you and say, okay, here's our guide, you need to make your plate look just like that. You know, they're going to think, wow, there's no way I can ever do that. So if you kind of help reassure them that if they can try to choose a variety of foods and aim to include foods from at least 3 food groups at meals, they're having a snack at least 2, then that's a pretty good way to help them you know, recognize that, you know, they're going to be doing a better job at getting that variety in.
So if I do a protein and a vegetable, and maybe a dairy
Mm-hmm.
or a grain at a meal, then I can do the fruit and maybe a dairy for my snack, or fruit for one snack and a dairy for the other.
You could look at it like that. I mean, if you can aim to include, say, you know, all 4 of these, that's great. But, you know, I guess what I'm suggesting is trying to at least do 3. Protein and your dairy foods also provide you with a source of protein. That protein is helpful. It does help you feel satisfied and full. So, you know, I would encourage you to at least consider to include one of those or some alternatives to the dairy, such as your soy milks. We had conversations earlier. You know, other non-animal protein sources, if you wish, and choose that as well. That can certainly be included in that. Okay? Yes, sir.
Is it true to say that fruits and vegetables are underrepresented, you know, in the general food
Oh,
scene?
absolutely. I think the last statistics
certainly
I
in a
saw was
restaurant.
like 85% of Americans don't consume the recommended intake of fruits and vegetables every day. So yeah, definitely that, and I will say that, you know, dairy intake, we have to look at, you know, for at least our children and our teens is, you know, often replaced anymore with the sports drinks and the pop and the water, and that's where we're falling short too often in the potassium and the vitamin D, as those foods provide a rich source of that, too. Okay, yes, sir,
And nuts?
yes,
What's that?
nuts would be a protein. Mhm. Yep,
So-
nuts do
so-
count as a protein serving.
So with the things that you said we're not getting enough of, the vitamin D, the dietary fiber,
Uh-huh,
potassium,
yes, and calcium. So just to point out a couple things in your folders that you know you have to take home with you, you have a picture of the plate. You will have this as something you can take to your groups as well to speak to them, so they can go home with a picture of the plate. That plate is appropriate for, again, anyone over the age of 2, okay? So even for young families, this is a great way to help, help them guide their meals. For you, if you would like more information on the plate, their website is fabulous. It's a free source. If you go to choosemyplate.gov, which is right under your plate on that blue colorful handout you have, you will find many complements to the information that I've talked to you about today. There's a whole section on healthy eating on a budget. We could sit here and talk for hours, on this topic, but I definitely would encourage you to look to that as a resource for yourself. Even if you're interested, how do you fit in with meeting your needs daily? There's a component to that called Super Tracker that is a free way to track your intake, and it gives you wonderful feedback at the end of your day on just where you're falling with not just calories, but with all of those individual nutrients as well. So please take some time and look through that choosemyplate.gov site when you have a chance. If you don't have a computer, and maybe you can share this with your groups, the libraries, do have access to the internet. If they would like to ever, go out and do some more information searching, on their own too. You also have a handout in your folder, 2 more I want to mention. One that looks at food sources, vitamins and minerals. So it will look specifically at calcium. Then it'll give you a column of where can I get calcium from, within my diet. It'll give you iron. Where can I get iron from? Because iron is actually a nutrient that most women that are of childbearing age aren't getting enough of either, or tend to have low levels of. So that's a specific population. The other population I failed to mention now that I just thought of was older adults over the age of 50. We tend to not have enough B12 in our diet, or we have lower levels within our body having to do with how age and absorption is affected. The last but not least handout that I have placed in your folder looks at low sodium ways to season your food. If you're anything like me, I know a lot of you said that you enjoy cooking. I do as well, but I'm really not that great at just knowing to take a spice or a seasoning out of my cabinet, and just doctor it into I like to have a guide to know what, works best with which type of food I'm preparing, whether it's poultry or meat or vegetables, even desserts. It gives you some seasoning suggestions for those too. So again, the idea is that you have this information, once you know what target group you're going to be speaking to, you can kind of create your own outline and what you would like to highlight, because it does take about 30 minutes for you to prepare your meal, so you will have some time once you prepare that meal to have a discussion, within your group. So I would suggest you use that plate as kind of your key focal point. Take some time to go through the food groups. As I mentioned earlier, I do outpatient counseling. I'm maybe not surprised anymore, but typically I am surprised at how many people, adults, don't know the 5 basic food groups and what foods belong to the food groups. That is step 1, and then looking at that variety again. But at the end of the day, it comes back for any of us to make change, we have to take them a small step at a time. So, give that reinforcement, give that encouragement. No one expects anyone to go home and, have their plate looking just like that picture that I've showed you today as well. But we want to encourage those small steps. Every little change makes a difference, as they work towards a healthier diet.